And we are lucky that Vishal has agreed on our request, and this is also a blessing for us. Sir is present at here, and you people are also lucky that you are able to learn from such a renowned person and such nice teacher. And I make one thing clear: you are here since last 6 months, and many participants are from other universities also. Today you will be able to make a gap between a teaching person and non-teaching person. And after that, I will ask to you whether you previously you have met any teacher or not met any teacher. So we are lucky, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for those kind words. So I will try to reflect on the concept and determinants of productivity in the first part of my presentation. Then in the second part of my presentation, I will come to the actual estimation methodology. So there are alternative methods of estimating productivity. So I will try to make you aware of some of those techniques. Of course, not all the techniques will be possible, but at least some of them. And then in the third session, I will take you to the soiling your hands through certain exercises. So I will show you in the Excel sheet that how you extract the data and how you actually operationalize those concepts to estimate the productivity. So in the first session, we try to talk about the concept and determinants of productivity. What exactly we mean by productivity? And why are we interested in this concept of productivity? How do I move the PPTs? So you can actually make a distinction between factor productivity and total factor productivity. So factor productivity is a very simple thing. So you take value added and value added divided by, let us say, labor. Okay. So you will get value added per labor. So that is what is called as your labor productivity. But labor productivity can be misleading. Why? I tell you. Suppose you are producing 100 units of value added of, let's say, iron and steel. Now you can have alternative techniques of production. So you can engage 2 units of capital, 50 units of labor. Okay. So what is labor productivity? 100 divided by 50. That is your labor productivity. Now suppose someone suggests that no, I will not use labor intensive method. I will use capital intensive method of production, where I will be engaging 10 units of capital and 20 units of labor. Okay. So 100 divided by 20. Labor productivity is high, 5. So can you really compare between them? No, not always. Because in a labor surplus economy like India, labor price is much lower, much lower than capital price. So if you are engaging 10 units of capital, then that means the cost can be enormously large. Whereas in a capital rich country, particularly the European nations or United States, their labor price is very high. So they do not want to engage human labor. So they would like to engage capital. So this concept of labor productivity, or what we call as factor productivity, can be misleading. We cannot sort of conclude anything very assertively based on this concept of labor productivity. That is the reason why we are interested to measure total factor productivity. So total factor productivity would try to sort of net out the entire expenditure that you are incurring. The expenditure on capital, the expenditure on labor, material, energy, etc. And then to see what is the gain. So on the one hand, you have the output series, on the other hand, you have the input series. So you net out the input from the output. Of course, it's not so simplistic. I will show you, but concept-wise, it is basically you net out the growth of the inputs from the growth of output, and whatever the residual is left is called as your total factor productivity growth. Perhaps, so in conceptually we say total factor productivity growth is equal to technological progress plus change in technical efficiency. You don't have a board here, no? It would have been very interesting if I could draw certain things. Anyway, I'll try to draw in the air so you will be able to follow. See, technological progress would mean, suppose in the horizontal axis you are taking inputs, and in the vertical axis you are trying to take the output. So you will be able to see an inverted U-shaped relationship. What that is called as your production frontier. for a given level of input, what is the maximum at a level of output. So at every point of input, you are able to see this kind of a curve. But from reality point of view, not necessarily we will be able to reach that optimal point. Because there are many constraints which will not allow us to realize the maximum at another level of output. So we will be below that frontier. Okay. So then when you are below that frontier, you can measure to what extent you are closer to the frontier and to what extent you are below the frontier. Okay. So when you are closer to the frontier, that is measured as your efficiency. And the distance below the frontier is called inefficiency. So suppose you can produce 100 units of output. You can, but you are not actually be able to produce 100 units of output. You are producing 80 units. So 80 divided by 100 is your efficiency. 20 divided by 100 is your inefficiency, percentage-wise. Okay. So that is what is called as your technical efficiency. Now imagine that curve which is given shifts upwards. Shifts upwards means for given level of input, now you are able to experience much higher levels of output. Okay. So that is what is called as your technological progress. So technological progress would mean that for a given level of input or for given levels of inputs, you will be able to realize higher and higher levels of output. So now when the new technology comes, whether your efficiency will remain as 80% or will increase or will decrease. That is the question. Suppose I am using this laptop. I have certain packages, etc. Suppose all of a sudden, a very new technology is given. So new technology is supposed to improve my efficiency to a much larger extent. But in reality, I may not be able to do so. Suppose I do not know how to access, how to utilize Pentium 11. Okay, fine, Pentium 4, 5, fine. But Pentium 11 comes. I do not know how to utilize the very advanced level of technology. So I will be struggling to utilize that new technology. So what it means that when the level of technology improves, technological progress takes place. This was the frontier, now you have a higher frontier. Technological progress has taken place, but that does not necessarily mean that I will be able to realize the new potential of the new technology. It is quite possible that my efficiency may come down or efficiency may increase. So what you are able to see that this technological progress can be a positive, let us say 5%, it can be positive. But change in technical efficiency can be negative. Change in technical efficiency, old technology, I was 80% efficient. With new technology, maybe I am 70% efficient. So that means efficiency has come down from 80% to 70%. So this quantity can be positive, but this quantity can be negative. And if the negative quantity is greater than the positive quantity, total factor productivity growth can be negative also. Yes. So, not necessarily total factor productivity growth is always going to be positive. It can be zero, it can be extremely sluggish, it can be negative also. And that is what the problem is. So we are saying economic growth must shoot up. We must work on strategies to maximize our economic growth. But economic growth maximization does not solve the problem of the developing countries. Because you may be experiencing technological progress, but your technical efficiency may be coming down. You measure the technical efficiency for each of the Indian industries. You will find total factor productivity growth is very, very low. 1%, negative 0.01%, something of that. So, which means that economic growth can be 7%, 8%, 9%. That means you are utilizing a lot of resources and you are experiencing higher growth. That means for the future, you are not conserving your resources. So if you utilize more and more resources and you experience very high levels of growth, there is no credit at all. Credit lies in the fact that when you are able to generate more and more growth with lesser and lesser utilization of resources. Or to put it differently, with the same level of resources, you should be getting more and more output. How is that possible? That is possible only through your innovative methods, innovations. So so you are able to make a distinction between factor productivity and total factor productivity. And then total factor productivity, as you can see, is basically a combination of two important constituents. So technological progress and change in technical efficiency. Most of the governments, most of the countries, most of the entrepreneurs are directed to raise the technological progress, but they do not pay much attention to raising the technical efficiency. That is the reason why sometimes we find technological progress is enormously large, but technical efficiency is not improving. Rather, it is deteriorating. Some time back, there were some newspaper clippings that were in very advanced medical institutions like AIMS, etc. They have acquired very new technology from other developed countries. But the doctors and other scientists and the researchers, they did not know how to utilize those technology. So those machines were lying locked inside the chambers. So acquiring technology does not necessarily mean that we will be able to improve our performance. So that is why total factor productivity growth can be negative. So now we will try to sort of talk about this concept that in what way our total factor productivity growth can be raised. So non-resource driven growth is the key to sustainable development in the long run. That is the key point. Because if you are using up your resources and you are experiencing very high growth, that is no credit at all. You should be utilizing resources to the minimum possible extent, but your growth should be maximized. Then only the difference between output growth and the resource utilization growth will be large. And if that difference is large, it would mean that your total factor productivity growth is also high. So growth in output, which is more than proportionate increase in inputs, is attributed to total factor productivity growth after controlling for returns to scale. So there is a concept called returns to scale. Returns to scale, you must have learned it at the undergraduate level. So when a firm is starting its business, so you would find you are utilizing certain factors in indivisible terms. You cannot buy capital like 5 units of capital, 10 units of capital. No, it's not possible. You acquire a huge bunch of capital, 100 units of capital. So that means initially, if you are producing less, the scale of economies can be enhanced with the same level of capital. If you raise your volume of production, you don't have to raise your capital. Already you have acquired. You have already lot of stock. So that is called as your increasing returns to scale. Similarly, you will have constant returns to scale. Beyond a point, you will find that output will be increasing in proportion to the inputs. Then the phase will come when decreasing returns to scale will start. That means the returns to the utilization of resources would be less and less. So we are not talking about that concept. So total factor productivity growth does not refer to this particular concept. That is a stylized fact. That is a obvious thing. That the moment you start a business, there would be increasing returns, constant returns, decreasing returns. So we are not referring to that. After controlling for returns to scale, what we are able to see that the difference between output growth and the input. So that means we try to presume that there is constant returns to scale. Output is increasing, input is increasing. You are not taking advantage of the stage at which you are located. You may be in the initial stage, you may be at the mature stage, you may be having a very, very old farm. That is not a concern. Concern is what is the output growth, what is the input. And that difference should be as high as possible. That is what is called as your EFG. Now you know in the literature what are the determinants of growth has been a very important proposition. And it started from the 1960s that in what manner we can augment our overall growth. So Solow, who got the Nobel Prize, he was basically the first one to say it is technological progress which can augment your growth and also total factor productivity growth. He was the first one to harp on technological progress. But then we would be able to see that there are many other factors which are also determining your total factor productivity growth. So one class of literature emerged that is called as your endogenous growth theory. Endogenous growth theory would say that growth is the dependent variable and you have a number of factors which can contribute to economic growth. So one class of literature suggested that good governance is very important for growth to be maximized. Similarly, another class of literature said human capital formation is very important. Another class of literature suggested the trade relationship is very important to improve your growth. So role of government, role of state, infrastructure building. So likewise, a large number of factors were identified as the determinants of economic growth. And that is what is called as your endogenous growth models. Romer is called as the father of your new endogenous growth theory. So he basically referred to a wide range of factors, and towards the end, he also includes the ICT. That the role of ICT is also very, very important. That it can also contribute to higher levels of growth. Given capital, labor, role of state, etc., all other factors, your ICT augmentation can also contribute to high levels of growth. And then another class of literature which emerged much later, that is your import of technology and FDI. They suggested that most of the time the developing countries do not have enough resources. They have to struggle with poverty reduction, etc., etc. So they do not have enough resources to undertake innovation. Then where will they get the innovative resources to pursue technological progress, etc.? So there the suggestion was that, okay, you try to procure the technology from the developed countries. So there is an organization called UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development. Industrial Development Organization. So UNIDO, its headquarters is based in Vienna. So UNIDO tries to suggest that every country must industrialize. So their motto is, the slogan is industrialize or perish. So every country, if has to progress, has to modernize, they must try to pursue industrialization. So from that point of view, what it was suggested that technological progress must be encouraged. But the developing countries are not able to pursue technological progress. What will then happen? They say that if the developed countries have already innovated a technology, then it can be imported by the developing countries. So developing countries are resource scarce, so they do not have to waste their resources in rediscovering the wheel. So the proposition is, if the wheel has already been discovered in some part of the world, it need not be rediscovered by the developing countries again. So it can be imported by the developing countries. So for import of technology, can't we have some control over the activities which are going outside? Can we not convey any message to उनको कुछ बता नहीं सकते हैं कि ये बहुत ज़्यादा हो रहा है? So the question is, how would you import those technologies? Because the moment you import that technology, cost is involved. So foreign exchange, you have to have enough foreign exchange. Now your exchange rate is undergoing a devaluation. That means for the same good, you will have to pay more and more foreign exchange. So how would you get that? So from that point of view, what they suggest is that you will have to demolish all trade barriers. So your trade barriers will be removed so that you will be able to undertake trade strategies which will augment your exports to a significant extent. So when your exports will rise, obviously your foreign exchange earning will increase. So from those increased foreign exchange, then you will be able to import those or buy those new technologies. So that is what the UNIDO had suggested. And then UNIDO also suggested that you should encourage FDI, foreign direct investment, to your economies. All the developing countries must try very hard to get the FDI from other countries. Because the idea is when FDI comes, it doesn't mean only some money will flow into your economy. Along with the money, the new technology will also come.
Yes.
The innovative methods would also come. So the technical requisites would also come. Collaborations will take place. So your human beings would be able to learn more from the foreign nationals. So that was the kind of suggestion which was being made. So FDI and import of technology and FDI also result in technological advancement, contributing to total factor productivity growth. When Kuznets got the Nobel Prize in 1966, so he was basically trying to argue that the developed countries must keep on innovating, one after another. They should not be sitting down quietly. One after another, new technology and new innovation must take place. And the developing countries would be chasing them. So there would be a kind of race. The developed countries are running ahead and the developing countries are trying to catch up. So that is the key to progress. The moment the developed countries will sit down quietly, then the developing countries will catch up. And once they catch up, then the game is over. So therefore, to continue this process, it is very important that productivity growth has to take place. And productivity growth will come only when you have this race is happening in a continuous manner. When the developed countries are able to pursue technological progress in a continuous manner, translating into shifts in higher levels of productivity, then only the world will experience a continuous trend of rising productivity. But right now, we are able to see at the global level, TFPG has witnessed a deceleration in the recent past. Total factor productivity growth at the global level has been declining. So that becomes a major question, that why it is not improving at the global level. The productivity decline is indicative of poor performance of both from the point of view of the developed as well as developing countries. The developed countries are not able to innovate more and more. They feel that the ICT is a crucial component for innovation, and ICT has already reached a boom. Further improvement in ICT is not taking place. I mean, whatever improvement is taking place is only marginal, but not really a ICT boom in that sense. So unless a new ICT boom takes place, it is not really possible to have new technological advancement. So from that point of view, their idea is that the developed countries, thank you so much, they are able to see that the developed countries are not able to experience further increase in innovation and technology. So once it has come to a standstill, then the developing countries are also not able to experience much better technological progress. Investment growth has slowed down. So there we are also able to see that investment is an important determinant of total factor productivity. And the investable resources are declining. In many countries, the government is in dire need of resources. So it is taxing some of the enterprises at a very rapid rate. So like in the US, for example, the tax rate is very high. Even a student pays tax rate. Because you are receiving fellowship, so you pay a huge amount of tax to that. So from that point of view, what happens? The investable resources, the quantum of investable resources is declining. And new innovation requires more and more resources. The innovation which you had undertaken in 20 years back, compared to that, the new innovation would require more resources. And that additional resources, many countries are not able to generate. So therefore, investment growth has slowed down in both developed and developing countries, with implications on innovations, skills, and infrastructure. Because then the revenue is declining, so out of that reduced revenue, obviously, infrastructure, etc., not being created. The technological progress among the leaders has decelerated, particularly the countries which were supposed to lead the whole economy, supposed to lead the entire world. They have now failed. Failed in the sense their innovation process has come down, and therefore technological advancement in those countries has also been reduced significantly. Even when factor input contributions remain relatively strong, TFPG declines occur in the emerging market economies. So once the developed countries are out of the race, then we would be expecting from the emerging economies, because they are the ones which should be able to contribute to total factor productivity growth. But the emerging economies, except China, I don't think they are able to do good. And for China, we do not know what is the actual truth, because their data, I mean, can be cooked up. So we don't know whether that data is reliable or not. But if you believe that Chinese data, you will find that China's total factor productivity growth is much higher than India or any other emerging economies. So on the one hand, we are able to see that the developed countries are not able to take the lead role which they were expected to take. On the other hand, the emerging economies have also failed significantly, and hence they are not able to contribute to the world total factor productivity growth. And the other point relates to the contribution of ICT has reached the saturation point. So already, whatever the ICT sector could contribute in terms of total factor productivity growth has been done. Now, in last 10 years, whatever advancement is taking place in the ICT sector is only marginal. It's not really a significant breakthrough compared to 60s or 70s or 80s. In 90s, we experienced a major breakthrough. But after that, it is only some marginal additions. So therefore, your total factor productivity growth is not really picking up significantly. Okay. Though the labor share is on the decline, the share of intangible capital is on the rise. Another reason why total factor productivity growth is not increasing is because of intangible capital, which is very, very expensive. Like, what is a value added? Value added is a function of capital and labor. Okay. Or output is a function of capital, labor, material, energy. Now, capital is not homogeneous. Capital can have many components. So, to simplify it, we can say capital can be tangible capital, the physical capital, which would include your land, machine, everything, and the intangible capital. The intangible capital is the human brain. So, the human brain which can actually initiate the innovation. So, what we are able to see that the physical capital price is increasing, true, but not so much in comparison to the intangible capital price. Intangible capital price is enormously large. Even after creating this European unions, you will be surprised to see that there is tremendous competition among each of the countries. Who is going to innovate a particular technology? And suppose Germany has done it, Germany is not going to share it with other French or Spanish companies free of cost. No? Huge cost is involved. So you are able to see that the cost of intangible capital is extremely high, and it is increasing steadily over time. And that is the reason why your total factor productivity growth has been very, very sluggish. So if you yourself cannot innovate, then you will have to buy it, and if you buy, then obviously all your foreign exchange or your resources. Japan, for example, you know that they have land scarcity, such a small country, and almost 2/3 is hilly areas and water, etc. So only 1/3 plain land they have. So they are not in a position to even cultivate their food items. So even the ordinary food items would be imported. Much of the vegetable, etc., they are imported from the rest of the countries. So where will they get the resources from? So what they do, that their motto is for every company, for every small company also, motto is work on productivity. Work on productivity means you try to innovate. You try to innovate a technology such that you will be able to sell it to the world at an enormously high price, and then you will be able to earn the money, and with that money you will then import the food items, etc. So their motto is modernization without westernization. So don't try to follow the Western world. We would follow the modernization path in our country. So that is how your intangible capital price is going up, and that is the reason why these countries are not able to experience very rapid total factor productivity growth. So on the other hand, a number of reasons are cited to suggest that new technology can still create new employment opportunities. Vivarelli had a paper, Marco Vivarelli, an Italian economist. So he is very hopeful. He is very optimistic. He tries to argue that yes, I will agree that the intangible capital price is very high and total factor productivity growth scenario is very bad in the world situation, but there is still hope. Hope in the sense the fourth industrial revolution can create new strategies, can give us new scope for development. And he suggests that if everyone would be engaged in innovation, trying to sort of innovate such a new technology, etc., then the new technology will come to the real world and the price of the new technology will slowly come down. And once the price of the new technology comes down, then it will become affordable for every company, for a small company as well as for a large company. And then he argues that product diversification can take place. We have been manufacturing only certain range of products. Then each company can pursue product diversification. Instead of producing only X for several years, it can produce X and Y. So with the same resources, when you are diversifying your products, then naturally cost will come down. Like in the Thane Belapur region in Maharashtra, you had many companies where they used to throw away some of the raw materials because they thought it is the product of the production process, byproducts of the production process. Slowly they learned how these byproducts can be processed. So earlier, suppose they were manufacturing only X, now with those byproducts, they are able to manufacture Y. So X and Y both are being manufactured. So the cost of production has come down. In other words, total factor productivity growth is rising. So from that point of view, Vivarelli is very, very hopeful. He says that fourth industrial revolution should not create a terror among us. We should be able to recognize the positive aspects of the fourth industrial revolution. I mean, the AI is there, which can be applied in every field, but then it also requires the help of the human beings. And in what way the complementarities can be developed is the key question. And he is very hopeful that such complementarities can be created. He also mentions about a very interesting point. He says, what do you mean by economic development? Economic development doesn't mean that certain indicators will be satisfied. Fertility rate will come down, mortality rate will come down, better educational attainment, better health quality. No, it's not just that. Economic development also means that how many new products you are able to bring to the economy. So when you are pursuing the production of new products, automatically it would mean that innovation will take place. And that innovation is going to sort of contribute to the total factor productivity growth. So this paper by Marco Vivarelli is very interesting. Of course, he's very modest. Towards the end of this paper, he says, well, this is only a theoretical conjecture. Now, we need to see empirically whether we will be able to actually realize these benefits or not. Labor saving effects of technology can be offset through these are the reasons which he has talked about. New products created using new technology, decreasing wages resulting from price adjustment mechanisms. He says that many companies are complaining that labor cost is very high. But actually, you have replaced labor by machines. So in that sense, labor cost is not always increasing. Yes, intangible capital, that means the labor which is engaged, which is highly skilled, the price is increasing at a fast pace. But he is very hopeful. He says that when technology will be domestically innovated, then the cost is going to decline, and that will contribute to total factor productivity growth in a significant manner. So when we are saying that we want to actually endogenized growth. Endogenized growth means we want to take economic growth as a dependent variable and we want to identify the determinants of economic growth. It is same thing as saying that we must try to identify the determinants of total factor productivity growth. Because I argued right in the beginning that economic growth cannot be the right indicator. Our media is flashing that economic growth maximization. That's not the right criteria. The right criteria is the total factor productivity growth. So, what are the determinants of total factor productivity growth should be the key question. So that is why we say endogenizing total factor productivity growth is same as endogenizing growth theory. So, I mean, I'm not saying growth is same as total factor productivity growth. What I am saying, the determinants of economic growth can also be taken as the determinants of total factor productivity growth, the causes, the contributors. So when you look at the endogenous growth theory literature, Arrow, again who got a Nobel Prize, so his work again related to the modeling technical change. That what can motivate companies to come up with new technological progress, with new technological change. In what way you would measure technological change? So all those questions were taken up. I mean, in what way knowledge can actually be translated into workable strategies? I mean, there should be a coordination between what we are learning at the knowledge hubs and there should be a lab where we are actually able to translate into operational part. Otherwise, that knowledge hub will remain restricted and it will not result in tangible outcomes. So Arrow's point was basically that we have to constantly work on technical change and how to convert that technological change into operational strategies. And following Arrow's model, Solo also talked about technological progress. So the other knowledge-based endogenous growth models, for example, the imitation model is derived from the work of Barrow and Salam. So the first paper which appeared in the World Bank Journal by Barrow and Grossman, that was sometime in 1976. World Bank Economic Review, the paper appeared, that what are the major determinants of economic growth, total factor productivity growth, etc. And when you were saying that technological change is the key determinant, what will then motivate for you to pursue technological progress? And many others contributed. Salai Martin, who was a PhD scholar of Barrow and subsequently he co-authored with Barrow and came up with many suggestions. And then you have Romers, another influential knowledge-based endogenous growth theory. So their whole importance lies in the fact that the knowledge level will improve. The knowledge level, once it is improved, then you can think of creating labs where the knowledge, enhanced knowledge, will be translated into workable or operationalized strategies. Here, Senna's study particularly, they again emphasized on research and development. So that means each company must have a research and development wing where innovative activities would be possible. There is a very interesting study by Center of Development Studies from Trivandrum. So one of the faculty members had conducted that how authentic the research and development expenditure is. And he showed that much of our figures of the companies shown under research and development is all fabricated. Your staff will visit foreign countries, so that entire expenditure, travel expenditure, will be shown as research and development expenditure. You invite people from abroad, they will be residing in the hotels, that entire expenditure will be shown as research and development expenditure. So there is a huge, and why they do show such high figures under research and development head? Because the government will give you a lot of tax benefits. You might have seen that movie, Guru, by Abhishek Bachchan and Aishwarya. So, in those days, exports, if a company is able to export a lot, then you will get a lot of tax benefits. So, what he did, he just put up certain empty boxes in the ship. And they showed that so many boxes have been uploaded. And then the ship will go a little and then you dump all those boxes inside the ocean. But the record shows that you have exported, and hence you will get all those tax benefits. Right? So the similar thing is being followed now in the name of research and development. There is another stalwart, Naveri, found a positive and strong relationship between R&D and the growth of output or total factor productivity. Of course, he analyzed the data from the developed countries, where your research and development data is more authentic, unlike our data set. And he could show that no, there is actually a positive association. If a company is able to contribute to research and development expenditure significantly, that it will definitely contribute to growth and total factor productivity. Then the channels of diffusion of spillovers vary considerably. This is a very interesting theory, the spillover theory. What they argue that if one sector is undertaking innovation and if there is technological upgradation, it will immediately have a lot of spillover effects into the other complementary, vertically, horizontally related industries. You take the example of automobile. Automobile industry is the one, whether it is domestic or foreign, maximum technological advancement is taking place and has taken place in the last 10-15 years. And you will be able to see that whichever industry, however small it is, whichever is associated with the automobile industry, horizontally or vertically, they are all upgrading their technology. Otherwise, the inputs or the other materials which they are manufacturing will not have a compliance with the automobile industry. So obviously they will have to upgrade their technology. So they may take the form of intra and inter-industry relationships. So once there is one technological upgradation in one sector, it can have significant spillover effects either through various industries or within a given industry you have subsectors. So across various subsectors also it is possible. Then interdependence between public and private sector. So this particular hypothesis emerged during the mid 80s and 90s. There is a book by Michel Alverga, Growth and Stagnation of the Indian Industry since the mid 60s. So what happened, if you look at the Indian experience, immediately after independence, the Mahalanobis strategy, second 5-year plan, Nehru-Mahalanobis strategy, they wanted to emphasize that we must become self-sufficient. We should not depend on the foreign countries. The moment you will depend on the foreign countries, again, financial, imperial, trade, etc. relationship will emerge, and again we will become the slaves of those countries. So let us try to manufacture the goods which we would have otherwise imported from the developed countries. So that is what is called as the import goods-based industrialization, heavy goods-based industrialization. The Nehruvian model envisaged that to prosper, you must have your own nuclear plants, your own factories, your own iron and steel industries, etc. So under the second 5-year plan, you will find that most of these heavy goods industries were sort of created. And what was the hypothesis? The hypothesis was that once the base is created, it will have a lot of spillover effects. It will promote the private sector to come into the picture. But what happened? Soon after, almost 15 years, okay, in 51, 52, this kind of strategy was introduced. By mid-60s, 1965, 66, suddenly the industrial growth went down. So it was a major shock to all of us that we just tried to industrialize, but within 15 years, our industrial growth rate almost halved. So then people were trying to sort of identify the causes. The Rao and Patnaik hypothesis from JNU school emerged to say that actually there is interdependence between public and private sector industry. Once the public sector units take the lead and they create infrastructure, then only the private sector industries would come into the picture. So the institution of private property is very, very important. Suppose I have set up an industry and tomorrow the state government or national government says that it can take over. So then naturally I don't have any confidence to make more investment. I know that it can be gone, and that is the kind of fear most of the industries were suffering from. You take the note of the negotiations between Tata, I mean, one of the top industrialists of that period, and the then government. The then government, in principle, has adopted the mixed economy strategy. So they are saying that we will not encourage the private investors only. The public enterprise is going to take a lead role. But then Tata is constantly worried that if my estate, industrial estate, will be taken away by the government, then what would be my incentive to? Then the writings come up, the letters. There is a book by Managerial which has been published very recently. So there he reveals that when the government is ensuring him with all private collaborations, etc., that you don't worry, we will try to give you all kinds of protection. You make investment as much as possible. So it is very important that the complementarity between the public and private investment must take up. Otherwise, the public sector will not be able to motivate the private sector to invest a lot and to raise the total active productivity. If the private sector knows that public sector is competing with me, then they will never come forward. The public sector must invest in those areas where the private sector is not interested. For example, creating a bridge or certain other railway tracks, that should be the domain of the public sector, so that it can create a lot of complementarities. Supplier and purchaser connections. So this was a very, very major problem. The connection between the suppliers of the raw materials and the purchaser of the raw materials. Huge time gap, and the resources and the intermediaries who were. Now don't think that all these intermediaries have disappeared now. The intermediaries exist in a different manner. There are contractors. That suppose your Louis Philippe is trying to engage certain garment stitchers and trying to collect those materials from your neighborhood. So Louis Philippe will not negotiate with those local garment makers directly. There will be a wide range of intermediaries through which the resources will be supplied, and again the final products will be collected. So in the process, what is happening? Lot of benefits, profits, etc. are being squeezed by the intermediaries. So it is very important that there should be direct connection between the supplier and the purchaser. Then what happens? The actual wage which you are paying to the local government makers will sort of directly transfer. And then geographical location. So geographical location is very, very important. You, particularly for a very large country like India, you should not be thinking that every industry, every product can be manufactured in every region. So there is a class of literature, particularly the urban economics literature, which to some extent overlaps with industrial organization theory. And there they try to argue that you must identify the potential of each region. That which region has a greater potentiality to manufacture which type of products. And if I have to just generalize in the light of Henderson's understanding, he says very capital intensive products should be manufactured in very large cities. Then semi-capital intensive goods should be manufactured in medium sized. Then relatively low capital intensive goods should be manufactured in the small towns. And the more labor intensive products like agriculture and allied activities should be manufactured in the rural areas. Then only you are able to save the resources. If you start cultivating paddy in a large city, then you are actually wasting the land and you are not able to get the actual benefit. So that is very important. The geographic location and the potential of each of the geographic location needs to be identified. Then only you will be able to work out a proper industrial map that which particular goods should be manufactured in which particular territory. Then as well as domestic farms and farms in other countries. So here one is trying to build a strong connection between the MNEs, the multinational companies, and the domestic companies. that in what way, even if you do not directly participate with the foreign companies, in what way certain kinds of information sharing can be encouraged, so that that information sharing will contribute to your technological advancement. Of course, they will not do it free of cost. So what are you able to offer them in exchange? So you say that, okay, certain parts of your product I will manufacture and I will give it to you. So you share the information with me. So they would realize that, okay, so if certain parts of the products are manufactured in your country, then it will save my resources. It will save my labor. So that is what is the concept of your global value chain, supply chain. So one particular product will not be manufactured in one specific country. Parts of that commodity will be manufactured in certain countries, certain other parts will be manufactured in certain countries. So at every process, then every country is benefiting. Well, empirically whether that is true or not is a different question. I am saying from the theoretical point of view. Through the study, so OECD had, Organization of the European countries, OECD countries had conducted a study, and they really noted that the diffusion of new technology is very rapid and transmitted not only through exports but also through FDI and MNE's research operations. So empirically, he tried to provide some evidence to this theoretical proposition. He said that no, it is actually happening in the developed world, of course, not really in the developing countries. That whenever there is such kind of global value chain or whenever there is such kind of collaborations, it is benefiting both the developed countries, that is those who are purchasing the product and who are manufacturing the product. So he justifies that FDI is definitely a determinant of the total market product. He concluded that more than half of TFPG can be explained by R&D spillover effects, and that having more R&D investments will lead to further increases in R&D spillovers. So if you, let us say, a particular country has experienced 2% total factor productivity. 2% total factor productivity growth is quite significant. 9% growth may not be all that spectacular because resources might have been utilized to a very large extent, but 2%, 3% total factor productivity growth makes a lot of sense. So he says that you can actually undertake a decomposition exercise. How much of this total factor productivity growth is coming from technology spillover? How much of the total factor productivity growth is coming from other factors? So he says that a very significant part, at least half of the total factor productivity growth, is coming from this research and development expenditure and also what you call as the innovation expenditure. One important conclusion which emerged from several studies: R&D activity is a channel for the diffusion of knowledge. So the moment you are innovating, you are opening a chamber that under the heading that research and development, it will automatically motivate you. I know there can be manipulations, but at the same time, it will automatically motivate you to look up to other countries, entrepreneurs in other countries, what they are trying to do, and whether I will be able to replicate or not. Let me give you an example here. When in the 50s and 60s, China was as bad as India was. I mean, people who have witnessed 50s and 60s, they have narrated those stories. That even in the streets of very large cities, you could see some boats and ships were moving around, chickens were moving around. But from that phase till now, you will find that there is a huge jump. And now most of the Chinese cities, the large Chinese cities, would replicate your New York or New Jersey or some of the cities of the very developed world. So what they did, China realized that they have surplus human labor. They are not able to engage them in productive activities. So the government took the initiative to collect information from other countries that those products should be cost efficient. That means it should not require huge amount of resources. But the moment it is manufactured, it can compete with other countries and it can sell there. So when you go to an European city, you will find Eiffel Tower is being sold. So one set of Eiffel Tower, at the back it is written made in China. Another set of Eiffel Tower, at the back it is written made in Paris or made in France. Prices are hugely different. Made in China, €1. Made in France, €6. So as a traveler, as a tourist, you are not interested whether it is manufactured made in China or made in France. You bring it and you put it in your showcase. So Chinese goods were sold significantly. So that is how the government collected the information on the marketability of a particular product. So they went around the Ganesha and Lakshmi for India. That's the best example, which are manufactured in China. They look much better, more impressive, and at the same time, they have a huge market. So, so that was the kind of initiative Chinese government took. I mean, irrespective of whatever negative criticisms we have against China, but this was the kind of initiative they took, and that engaged the human beings, human labor, productively and added to their total productivity. Even if we say that their figures are all manipulated, but these are some of the strategies through which they could actually enhance their total productivity. So one important conclusion which emerges from our discussion is that there has been research and development expenditure. So research and development expenditure which contributes to total factor productivity growth significantly, and also it has the ability to create diffusion. So once research and development expenditure gets enhanced in one sector, it will automatically encourage many other sectors to become. So widespread technology diffusion creates the possibility of increasing returns to investment. So you are always interested in the fact that if I am investing $100, I must be getting more and more returns. This year I get 5%, next year I should be getting 7%. So how is that possible? That is possible only when it is associated with technology diffusion. And what is the cause of technology diffusion? Technology diffusion can be realized only when you have R&D expenditure enhanced. So now we will try to. So we have now talked about. You please remind me of the first session, second session, third session. Okay. What is the cutoff limit? So, the one important determinant is your technological progress, etc. Of course, there is a huge criticism to this particular standpoint. Particularly, your Amartya Sen, he wrote a paper in Journal of Economics, and he was trying to argue that this entire literature is not really very fruitful. It's all full of ambiguity. So there in that paper, he says that one of the disciples, the dearest disciples of Buddha, Subhuti, he is born again on earth. And he has been asked to do this kind of an analysis. Then only he will attain Nirvana. So he is trying to estimate total factor productivity growth, capital series, labor series, which we will do a little later. And every time he comes back to Buddha, that this is how I have done the exercise, Buddha rejects, says that no, it's all rubbish, it's all wrong. So he tries to say that how would you make a distinction between capital and output? Suppose you have used a piece of wood to manufacture this table. Then next time when you are manufacturing another table, you are using this table to be your foundation so that another piece of wood can be placed on this table and you will manufacture the second table. So that means your output becomes capital for the next series. So he tries to argue that all these arguments, etc., are full of ambiguities and it is not possible. So he tries to dismiss. Anyway, we are not going to that literature. That's the typical Marxian literature. We will try to subscribe to the neoclassical literature, where we say that it is possible to pursue on these methods and it is possible to reap technological progress and it is possible to realize the total factor productivity. Similarly, there was another Marxian lady from Cambridge University, Joan Robinson. You might have seen her name, who talked about imperfect competition. The monopolistic competition concept was given by Chamberlain. Imperfect competition, almost the same concept, which was given by Joan Robinson. The entire male folk was quite against her when she tried to work. Okay. So she tried the entire spectrum of male economists went against her and they tried to criticize her. But then she was extremely radical. And she wrote that I do not know what Solow is talking about. Because Solow was getting the Nobel Prize at that time. So it is, he said, the difference between the output series and the input series is actually a residual. If you are aware of regression exercise, when you say y is a function of x1, x2, x3, x4, whatever is not being explained by x1, x2, x3, x4 will be captured by the error term, residual. So she said that it is all a black hole. It is Solow's black hole. I don't know what Solow is trying to sell to the whole world. Anyway, Solow was very angry. So Solow said that, well, the world cannot afford to wait till Mrs. Robinson comes up with her most desirable innovative methods. Let us go ahead with whatever we have discovered. So anyway, so this literature is full of criticism, but nevertheless, we will, as a learner, we will have to believe one in particular standpoint, and that is what I am trying to do. So other determinants of total factor productivity relates to your agglomeration economies. What is this agglomeration economies? Agglomeration economies would mean that if more and more activities are being undertaken in one region, concentration will increase. So high level of concentration will get you more benefits. So if you are a potential entrepreneur, you are trying to ask this question whether I would invest in Rohtak or I would invest in Delhi. The advice will be you should go and invest in Delhi. Because in Delhi you have more activities and therefore you would benefit in the process. They theorized, they sort of worked out the channels through which you will be able to benefit. So two important schools you will be able to see, Mills and Henderson, my supervisor. So the first paper from Edwin Mills came in American Economic Journal. So where he argued that irrespective of whichever activity you are doing, if you go to a large city where there are many people and many activities and a very large market, you would benefit much more than if you go to an isolated place. So which would mean that the firms which are located in highly concentrated pockets, they are the ones who benefit. You take the history of any country, take the history of Indian industries, you will find in the first phase they are all trying to concentrate in Mumbai region and Mumbai, Thane, Belapur region, slightly expanding slowly. So concentration not only strengthens the forward and backward linkages, but also reduces the cost of operation. You want to buy some information, buy some raw materials. So immediately the supplier will be there. A little while ago, what I was trying to tell you, that the supplier and the purchaser should be face to face. They should be closer to each other. So in a large city, it is possible to have a strong link between the supplier and the purchaser, which is missing in the remote areas. Similarly, you will find the effective price of infrastructure. Suppose government says that, okay, I will provide you a railway track, okay, for your company, but you will have to share the cost. So what is happening? There are 5 industries which would benefit from that creation of the railway track. So government will say that, okay, each of you then contribute this much. So because there are many users, it will be that the cost will be divided among those users. So in all, interdependence of industries in terms of input-output linkages, ancillarization and availability of infrastructure contribute to the growth of agglomeration economies. So the crux of this theory is that you should try to create such spaces where you have concentration of activities. At a later stage, we are able to see the concept of SEZ. SEZ is what? Basically creating those special economic zones, where your rate of return in investment is going to be much higher compared to in any other place. Export processing zones. So each company would decide that what is my potentiality, and then accordingly it would decide that where I should go and where I should invest. So here you were able to see that Amundsen brought out a number of the reasons that why the agglomeration benefits, we call them as agglomeration economies. Agglomeration benefits can be higher in the concentrated place. there is slight difference between Edwin Mills' concept and Anderson's concept. Edwin Mills said that whatever activities you are doing, you are manufacturing chemical goods, I am manufacturing iron and steel, all of us should come and do it in one region, Gujarat model. Henderson is saying, no, it's not concentration of all kinds of activities, concentration of specific type of activities. You are engaged in ICT, I am engaged in ICT, we should go to Hyderabad or Bangalore. That model, ICT model. So that is the kind of thing that Hermanson has made a distinction between these two. So Mill's concept is called urbanization economies, Henderson's concept is called localization economies. Okay. So both are agglomeration economies, but conceptually they are slightly different. So we have some evidence to show that large cities usually experience higher levels of productivity, total factor productivity or technical efficiency. In whatever way you are trying to measure, there is some evidence. But when I was doing this experiment, I could see that there is not a steady linear relationship. As size increases, productivity increases, no. Till a certain point it increases. Then beyond a certain point, it starts stepping off. That means every city would have a maximum saturation level or a saturation limit. So what is that limit we have to figure out? Like if you recall, Rajiv Gandhi way back said Calcutta is a dying city because state government is not pouring in enough infrastructure, so returns are less, so the new farms were not going to that city. Though in the first phase of industrialization, West Bengal was an industrial city. So a dying city in the sense that the total factor productivity growth is coming down. Okay. So therefore no farm could try to go and invest there. On the other hand, Gujarat model was throwing up much more prospects. So that is how we were able to see that the Western India progressed in terms of industrialization to a much faster rate compared to any other. Though to begin with, most of these areas, South, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal and Maharashtra, all three were taken. So higher levels of urbanization and TFPG, we are able to see that it goes up. There is a positive relationship, but then beyond a certain point, it starts tapering off. Then another most important point is your trade openness. That if you pursue greater trade association with other countries, then you will be in a position to experiment higher productivity. Because what will happen, suppose you are exporting. So you manufacture a particular good, you sell it to the other country. Those countries feel that no, your quality of product made in India is kind of taboo. So we don't want to buy it. You realize your mistakes, so you try to improve the quality. Improving the quality means what? Total factor productivity. You will try to raise the competitiveness of your product. So the greater trade openness is said to be the important strategy for raising your total factor productivity. Similarly, imported inputs. Recently, you must have seen in the newspaper, the government has given a lot of benefits in the last budget, gave a lot of benefits to the companies to import raw materials, to import other inputs from other countries, basically to encourage them to experience total factor. Empirically, we get to see there is mixed evidence. In certain industries, yes, trade relationship contributes to total factor productivity growth enhancement significantly. But in certain other industries where in spite of having good trade relationship, they are not able to work on total factor productivity growth. So the public infrastructure, I have already mentioned that public infrastructure has been identified as the most crucial determinant. The entire Northeast. Why there is no industrialization? Why there is no total factor productivity growth? That is precisely because you do not have adequate infrastructure. So in this particular study, when I was collaborating with my other collaborators from World Bank, so we could see that physical, financial, and social infrastructure. We try to collect information on three different types of infrastructure separately, and we could show that social infrastructure has a tremendous impact on total factor productivity growth. Social infrastructure means educational level of the available labor force, its employability, skill levels, educational attainment, health also. These are the important aspects. We usually think that it is the physical infrastructure. True, physical infrastructure is important. The financial infrastructure is important. If it takes months to receive a dollar encashment, then naturally your business will flop. So the financial infrastructure is important. But what is more important, we could see identify here, is your social infrastructure. So health education is the key determinant. And then the human capital investment plays a pivotal role. So the social infrastructure and human capital investment, they're basically the related pivotal role in driving TFP growth. Studies by members of Asian Productivity Organization reported positive effects of quality change in labor on TFPG due to high reputation level for most countries. See, after the Second World War, when Japan realized that we actually do not have full freedom, because US said that military would be under our control. You invest on human capital and other development indicators, we will give you resources. But after the Second World War, Japan absolutely, even as of today, they do not have a military freedom. So Japan then tried to create an influence on the rest of the world. How they could do it? It was through the creation of Asian Productivity Organization, which is a Tokyo-based organization. And they motivated most of the Asian countries that you become a member of our Asian Productivity Organization. So initially what happened, the entire East Asia and South Asia became member. Like Ministry of Industry and Commerce, our the central ministry, it has a wing called National Productivity Council, NPC. So either most of these East Asian and South Asian countries, they have NPC or NPO, that is National Productivity Organization. So their main objective is to follow the orders of this Asian Productivity Organization. And APO tries to argue that we have less resources, so let us not think of using up those resources. Our main objective is to create opportunities to use less and less resources. That means your total productivity growth should be enhanced. So their argument is that you spend a lot on human capital formation, on improving the levels of skill. On the job training is a must. For casual workers, you should have certain training programs. That will give them the flexibility to work and also to nurture yourself to diversify in various activities. So these are, and then finally we talk about the ICT, which I had already mentioned in the theoretical literature, and we are able to see that ICT has been playing a major role. So the ICT-led development based on the notion that investments in ICT can accelerate economic growth and can also contribute to total factor productivity growth is sort of established. So if I have to summarize, what are the factors that I have talked about? I have talked about the trade relationship, I have talked about the physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, human capital formation, and then the agglomeration requirements. That is, which region has a greater potentiality that needs to be identified. Usually in the textbook you will find concentration is a bad word. We had MRTP. Okay. But here in the agglomeration literature, one is saying that actually concentration is beneficial. If you have more concentrated activities, of course it will lead to distorted development. One region will develop at a much higher level compared to another region. But from the point of view of total factor productivity growth, you will find that the regions which are more concentrated will definitely benefit in terms of total factor. So that would be our first session. Okay.
You will also we may take a tea break.
We can take a tea. Thank you. A short tea break and then we will be done.